Alright, we have the first Crucible meta snapshot. Now the big part covering this is that over time, what's going to end up happening with Crucible is as we create these new hybrids and these new matchups for people to engage with in defense, people are going to come up with new counters. People are probably going to change their defense week to week based around what we're seeing and what's getting beat and how often it's getting beat by how much. That being taken into account, one of the things we can do is look at this week to week to see what happens, and if things come back, we can look back in time to find what worked before. So that being said, every week I'm going to start off with this new series, the Crucible Meta Snapshot. So we're going to cover each room. We're going to cover the most reliable offenses, or what maybe you don't want to use for offense because you're using it on your defense, or what's probably going to show up on your defense. So we're going to start off right at room 1. We have a few notes as we go. I'm now randomly typing in a box. We're going to talk about why certain things are going to act the way they do. So, room 1 and 2 is going to be pretty interchangeable, and I think any 2 of 3 teams are mostly going to show up here. We're going to end up with some combination of Astonishing X-Men hybrids, Web Warriors, and Black Order. Going first. Don't know how I keep selecting that box. Going first with Astonishing X-Men hybrids, the first counter you're probably going to want to look at is Black Order. It's going to be the most reliable counter to Astonishing X-Men. It's pretty much just set up Beast to get counterattacked to death following Ebony Maw's turn. Can punch up about 150-200k with Black Order into Astonishing X-Men. It's going to be your most reliable answer. Should hold true, especially if they run Phoenix, or if they run Ghost, whatever other character they might run instead of the full Axeman, or if they run the full Axeman. The second counter to that team would end up being Uncanny Magic. The only issue with that is you're probably going to want to save Uncanny Magic for a few other counters that we'll get to, and that's why I have it marked in yellow. So the system I have here is green is going to be the counter you want to approach first, yellow if you don't have it, red is what you can come to, but it's probably going to be something you're using on defense, or it's going to be somewhat unreliable. So, Web Warrior. Web Warriors is going to be the other team that you are likely to find in room 1 and 2. The primary counter to that, just like in War, is going to be Uncanny Magic. There's one exception to this that we'll talk about briefly, where it can be kind of complicated, but we'll get there here in a little bit. The second answer could be Black Order. Black Order is another team that works pretty well against Web Warriors. It has a little bit of RNG involved with the dodges, but as long as you focus down Gwen, it doesn't tend to be much of an issue. Dark Hunters does big punch-ups on Web Warriors. If you don't use Dark Hunters on defense, it's a very solid counter here. The only problem is that Dark Hunters is probably going to be one of the meta defenses in room 3. The third team that we're going to find on defense in these first 2 rooms, for many reasons, is going to be Black Order. Primary counter to Black Order, and that's why you probably want to avoid this defense, is going to be Symbiotes with Doc Ock. A team that otherwise doesn't have any place in Crucible at all. The problem you want to try to avoid is to give them as little resources to use as possible. By enabling them to use a team that's otherwise sitting on the bench, kind of hurting yourself, and giving them more options to work with later. The other option to Black Order is, of course, just taking Black Order into Black Order. A lot of veteran players have a ton of experience with this matchup. It's a matchup people play quite often in War, and they're pretty comfortable with it, so it's not really going to net you much other than soaking up a team that isn't really going to escape outside of rooms 1 and 2 anyways. If you don't have either of those options available to you, Any post-Silver Surfer meta team, Dark Hunters, New Warriors, Secret Avengers, even Web Warriors, if you for some reason have them on offense, can tend to beat Black Order when piloted by a player. Unfortunately, Black Order is an older team, it's not played perfectly by the AI, and it runs into a lot of issues. Room 3, Defensive Reversal. I'm going to remove my hand from the mouse here. With Defensive Reversal, loving entering random stuff into boxes, is where we start to get into room bonuses, and this is what's going to change the meta. So on turn, flip all defense up, deflect, and evade on that character's allies. The best defense is going to be a strong offense in both this room and probably room 4, apart from one team that we'll talk about there. Primarily in room 3, I'm looking at Dark Hunters with either Scarlet Witch if you have Emma, Loki, or Dormammu for Darkhold, or Mordo if you don't. Primary answer people are probably going to have to tap into here to deal with that team reliably is going to be Speed Eternals. You don't want to take Eternals in without a speed character, because you still run the risk, especially if their Dark Hunters are bigger than your Eternals, of them deleting you. Morbius has a faster speed than Icarus or Cersei without an additional speed buff. So you're going to have to bring Emma, Cable, Zemo, or Loki to get ahead of Morbius. Keep that in mind that if they do run a Dark Hunters with Loki or Emma, a speed character of their own, that you'll have to go the extra step to counter that. Second counter you could use would be the Dark Hunter mirror match with Loki. Reason this works is you go first and your entire team will get sped up through the Ghost Rider passive. Only problem is you'd have to focus down Ghost Rider to prevent the retaliation from possibly removing a key component of your team. However, if you do tend to get that head advantage, especially with Elsa deleting 2 or 3 characters, it's probably going to seal the match. A lot of people raise concerns with using Scarlet Witch on defense because of flipping the defense up and deflect, but what you have to realize is turn 1 she'll do her ultimate, extend all the debuffs, and keep the team going in speed bar. Likely by the time you get to her special, you'll already have that match sealed, or you won't. X Factor Zemo. Another team that can work here. Gotta avoid the Shatterstar ultimate. And you have to focus down Ghost Rider. X Factor doesn't have the durability of some of these older teams without that defense up or barrier going. And if you delete a character too quickly, Ghost Rider might take out one of the key members of your team. Particularly Longshot or Shatterstar. Losing either one of those can easily start the match to fall apart for you. The second team here is going to show up in a few different rooms, and it's New Warriors with JJ, Captain Marvel, and Punisher. Again, big thing here being Speed Eternals. Get ahead of them, try to delete it fast and quickly, keep in mind the difference in power. Brother Doom is another option to try to lock down the team and prevent them from going quickly. The only issue here is without the full team and a decent sized Magneto, probably running Skirmisher, you're running the focus issue, especially into JJ, Cloak and Dagger. Jessica Jones is going to give a resistance boost to City Heroes, making New Warriors that much more likely to resist your opening blind. If you don't land that blind, they're probably going to tear right through you with the Punisher damage against villains. Last counter there is probably the most reliable outside of Speed Eternals, but you really should have Dark Hunters on your own defense. That being said, if you don't, fast team, stack up the bleeds, focus on taking out one of Cloak or Dagger, take out the rest of A-Force, and go back and clean up the last member of Cloak and Dagger. Last team people are going to put here is Web Warriors. The problem with running Web Warriors here is the only thing that you miss is Evade. However, you aren't going to draw as many counters that are as reliable without having their defense up as you would draw in with Dark Hunters or New Warriors. So it's not so much about what Web Warriors does wrong, it's about what the other teams do right. That being said, anything that beats Web Warriors in Room 1 and 2 is probably still going to do it just fine here. Might have to be a bit closer because of the defense up problem, but Black Order, Uncanny Magic should still both be able to power through them relatively easily. Room 4. This is where it gets interesting. If sped up, clear all positive effects, apply 2 slow and 2 trauma. The most common team we're going to see here is probably going to be the full Marauders with Sabretooth and no Emma. Team's going to be relatively slower, but it's going to have a lot of damage output if you bring in a slower team. Anytime I go to scroll, this thing is getting me. So, big issue being, SA Kestrel is going to be their main counter. You cannot use the Captain Sam special if you go in with SA Kestrel against this team. The speed up on your entire team is just going to get flipped into slow and trauma. You're probably going to get overtaken. That being said, you'll prevent the Sinister clone, and you'll have the defense and the durability to make it through the match. Otherwise, the next best answer is going to be X Factor Zemo, focusing down Sinister, and probably throwing the early ability block on Madeline Pryor. Apart from that, you can try to use Uncanny Magic with the understanding that it's probably going to be a punch-down match. Versus larger Madelyns, you might run into the issue of her bonus damage against Phoenix, and duplicating extra attacks against your whole team. The next team we have that makes a big threat in Room 4 is going to be an X Factor Inhuman hybrid, with the 5th being either Hawkeye or Zemo. So it's going to be Black Bolt, Yo-Yo, Dad Bros, and one of those other 2 fast characters. Primary counter here is probably going to be a slower team. Looking primarily at Uncanny Magic. I accidentally put Black Order here. That's funny. We're going to change. Or a punch down with SA Kestrel. You do not want to bring in a team like Black Order here, which was an accidental placement by myself, because bringing in Black Order, the first thing that's going to happen is Thanos and Proxima are going to lose all their effects and get 2 slow and 2 trauma, which is going to open your team up to a lot of issues. You won't be able to use the flip to clear Thanos or Proxima, and you need Proxima ult to start to shut down Longshot before the team gets out of control. The other team here is an interesting one. So if you don't use New Warriors elsewhere, something you can do here, because people aren't going to have the fastest teams in the world here, is going to be New Warriors with Blob and Moon Knight. There's an interesting reason here. So you can artificially speed up Moon Knight anytime the enemy takes a turn by putting him adjacent to Blob and giving him those deflects. It's going to feed him speed bar and get him into his ultimate early, which is just going to be continued by Cloak and Dagger. It's going to be a powerful combo that can rip apart enemies quickly and shut down teams without cleanses. People are going to have to probably bring Speed Eternals and try to stagger through the slow and trauma. Other than that, they can try to run SA Kestrel, but the issue is that they're going to have to find a way to survive the opening barrage. Dark Hunters will be the most reliable counter to this bizarre combination, but again, it's probably going to be a team that you want to employ on defense. Now, for all the hot talk of Cosmic Crucible, the biggest threat is going to be Room 5. You have to have an answer to whatever team is likely to apply here. Generic Silver Bullet answers, Black Order, Infinity Watch, Eternals, even lower class counters like X Factor Zemo are going to stand no chance here. On all allied turns, you're going to reduce the speed bar by 50% for all of your cosmic allies. This room effect is going to destroy cosmic teams completely. That being said, we're also going to face what is probably the most brutal defense outside of Dormhold in the entirety of Cosmic Crucible in Room 5. Wakanda out the gate is going to open with a brutal barrage of speed, sustainability, and raw, unfiltered force. The primary counter here is going to have to be Young Avengers and Shang-Chi. Without Young Avengers and Shang-Chi, you're going to have to use Darkhold here, and if your opponent has Darkhold on defense, you're going to run into an issue where you won't answer one or the other team. Young Avengers and Shang-Chi is going to be the important counter because of a few different parts to the team. First, you're going to open up with both offense up and defense up from Echo and Kate Bishop. It's going to give your team the necessary punching power to try to stabilize out the early parts of the match. Beyond that, Echo is going to provide a critical play with her passive. Echo's going to shut out Okoye's assist so that your buffs aren't getting constantly cleared, which is going to be the problem with every other team. Okoye's basic has a ton of focus loaded into it. As a skirmisher, she's going to be employing a crazy amount of buff clear, stripping 3 to 4 positive effects with every assist. If you don't have a way to stop Okoye, you're not going to be able to counter this team reliably. It's going to be a nightmare of buff clear, triple taps, and pure raw sustain. So the answer here is, what if you don't have Wakanda? You can run an SA Shuri hybrid. Most people who didn't build up Wakanda still built up Shuri both for Dark Dimension and Doom Tech raids. Shuri's rework empowers her to a new form by enabling her passive to apply 3 deflect to any ally that drops below half health. This matters a lot in the context of Maria Hill, as well as Captain Sam and Sharon Carter. The Secret Avengers all have a complex and useful interaction with deflect, Captain Sam gaining bonus resistance, Maria Hill tossing out more healing, and Sharon Carter with her focus. So getting all those extra deflects from Shuri is going to help keep the team alive. Beyond that, the only operable counter that's going to tend to work is going to be some form of Doom team. A team that can still get locked behind Captain Sam's taunt, given his massive amounts of resistance. If you can't stop him from taunting, if you can't strip all of his deflects, you're going to run into a lot of issues with trying to make it through this team. This is where we might actually see Doom have to be moved to Skirmisher to have the focus to flip buffs on his basic, especially within Time Platform. The other option is going to be a lot less reliable, and it's going to be a mirror with Zemo. The reason this is less reliable is that you're going to have to try to focus down Shuri. Shuri is a much more durable character following her rework, and if you can't make it through her, you're probably going to follow into an RNG loop between Maria Hill with her passive and Shuri chucking out deflects. If the team's able to keep its sustain going, you're going to run into a lot of issues. Again, the ultimate answer being Darkhold, if and only if they don't have Darkhold of their own. Otherwise, you're going to have to find an alternative mean to counter this team. The final team you're likely to see in Room 5, outside of Young Avengers, which you can just counter with a mirror match, or with Wakanda on offense if you choose to run that. You can also counter it with SA. Probably have to use Doom. The last team you're going to see is Web Warriors. Web Warriors Uncanny Magic is going to be a little sketchy. I accidentally copied Black Order here too. Look at me going with Black Order. The issue with Uncanny Magic is that you're probably actually going to have to take magic off of the team to work. And it's going to make it a lot more of a punch across rather than a punch up, because magic's cosmic, she doesn't go until 3rd turn, she'll probably never move. The other team that you should be using against Web Warriors if they appear in Room 5 is SA Zemo. Team's going to go pretty quickly, it's going to allow you to build up a lot of damage, and have the control to stop Gwen from counterattacking you to death. Overall, Web Warriors is still a team that you really want to put earlier on because the higher impact defenses are going to thrive in room 5. Final room we have is room 6. With room 6, all turn meter manipulation has no effect. So a few key teams you're going to see here are going to be teams that can rely on a slower meta. New Warriors with Jessica Jones, Captain Marvel, and Punisher is going to make another appearance here. The main counter to that is going to be simply Infinity Watch, but if you are needing that team elsewhere, you can run into some issues. That being said, you can try to match it with New Warriors with Emma because Emma's passive will still work here. Her passive affects speed directly rather than turn meter manipulation. You can try to run Dark Hunters with Emma or Loki, understanding that Loki won't affect the turn meter of Morbius. Morbius will still go before the other team. Loki's here to help provide that extra chunk, slashing the enemy resistance, and boosting the focus of Morbius to land your negative effects to help counter this team. Again, the issue being, Dark Hunters should really be on defense. The second defense that you're likely to see and you have to plan for is going to be Infinity Watch. The easiest answer to this is the mirror match. Apart from that, you can run Omega Red, Lady Deathstrike, Kestrel, Icarus, and Cersei with a focus on taking out Nebula to prevent the team's assist mechanic. SAM Kestrel can try to do the same thing, but it's probably going to be more punch down territory rather than punch across. Understanding that you're not going to have any turn meter manipulation is going to hurt Captain Sam on his ultimate, it's going to hurt Icarus and Cersei's ultimates, Lady Deathstrike's special, and you're going to be relying a lot on pure damage and sustain to make it through the fight. The last team we're likely to see in this room, and this is probably the least likely, simply because there's better options, is going to be Skill Military if people have it at high levels of investment. Infinity Watch is probably going to make the pure appearance here if they don't have another team that they have to counter, just because Skill Military in and of itself is unfortunately an older team without a lot of the effects and survivability that they need. That being said, it's a team that's not going to be hurt by turn meter manipulation effects, and it's going to give it some room to breathe, especially if you don't have the right counter. So that being said, this was the first Meta Crucible Snapshot. We're going to be looking week to week to see how this evolves. Thank you. Please like and subscribe.